Very warm welcome, my dear students. So today we will be solving the October-November 2025 paper 0625 41, and we would be doing questions from 6 to 10. Questions 1 to 5 I've already solved in another part of the video, so you may watch that before solving this. Now we will directly jump to question number 6. Figure 6.1 shows part of an optical fiber used in high-speed broadband communication. For the A part, it says, state 2 advantages of using optical fibers in high-speed data transmission compared to electrical signals sent on copper wires. So, optical fibers are making use of total internal reflection. So, therefore, here the signals travel with the speed of light. So, we can say that the signals are actually traveling very fast. So we have faster data transmission in case of optical fiber cables. So that's your first point. Then for the second point, in optical fiber cables or whenever there is a phenomenon of total internal reflection, the loss in signal is negligible. So we can say that there is very less signal lost whenever we make use of the optical fiber cables. Now moving on to the B1. So B1 says the optical fiber is made up of glass with a refractive index of 1.4. Calculate the critical angle. Now we know that for the critical angle, the refractive index is equal to 1 by sine C, where C represents the critical angle. So if I rearrange this equation to calculate the critical angle, my C will be equal to 1. Sorry, not 1, it would be equal to sine inverse of 1 by n. So in our situation, my n here is nothing but 1.4. So if I put this on the calculator, my critical angle comes out to be 46 degrees. So we have just rearranged the formula and directly substituted the value. Moving on to the second part, state the meaning of critical angle. So what exactly is critical angle? Critical angle is the angle of incidence for which the angle of refraction is 90 degrees. Now moving on to the third part, on figure 6.1, label the angle of incidence of the ray of light as it hits the wall of the glass fiber. Draw the continuation of the ray until it leaves the glass fiber. So for this, we have already been shown an incident ray. All that we have to do is that we draw a normal here, and this angle of incidence here would be greater than the critical angle. Therefore, there will be total internal reflection here, and the light ray would be reflected to the other end. Again, I draw another normal over here. The light ray undergoes TIR again, and it further moves ahead like this. Further, again here I have to draw my incident ray. Again there is total internal reflection, and we shall continue doing this till the light ray falls out or the signal reaches outside the optical fiber cable. Every time there is total internal reflection, you can see that there is the angle of incidence has to be greater than the critical angle. Now that's all for question number 6. Let's move on to question number 7. So figure 7.1 shows a circuit containing a 6-volt battery of cells and 3 identical resistors. S1 is closed and S2 is open, and the current in the ammeter is 0.08 amperes. Calculate the resistance of R1. So the R3 here is not working right now, and we only have the current moving from R1 and R2, like only in the branch that contains R1 and R2. So now, since R1 and R2 are in series, therefore the total resistance here will be equal to R1 plus R2. So this would simply be equal to 2R because R1 and R2 are identical. So if I assume each resistance to be R, so this is 2R. Now, if I use the equation V is equal to IR and I apply it on the complete circuit, for the complete circuit, the voltage has been given to me as 6 volts current has been given to me as 0.08, and the resistance that we take for this part is 2R. On rearranging this and calculating my R comes out to be, so my R comes out to be 38 ohms. For the B part, S1 and S2 are both closed. Determine the reading on the ammeter. Now when S1 and S2 both are closed, then the branch that contains R1 and R2, let's say it has a current of I1, and the branch that contains R3 has a current of I2, and the total current here in the ammeter would be the sum of these two currents, would be I1 plus I2. So let's first calculate the individual values of I1 and I2, and then we can substitute for the ammeter reading, just simply add them. So I1 over here would simply be equal to 6, so it is simply V by R. So since the branches containing I1 and I1 and I2 are in parallel, therefore the voltage across each of them would be 6, and the total resistance in the branch containing R1 and R2 is 75 ohms. So when I substitute this, I get my I1 as, so my I1 comes out to be 0.08 amperes. Similarly, I can calculate my I2, which would be equal to 6 divided by 38. This comes out to be 0.16. So the total reading across the ammeter would be I1 plus I2, which would be equal to 0.08 plus 0.16. That gives me a total of 0.24 amperes as the reading across the ammeter when both the switches are closed. Now, moving on to the second part, explain in terms of the work done and potential difference why there is a larger heating effect in R3 than in R1. So the answer to this is pretty easy. We know that R3 is alone in the branch, right? Whereas R1 and R2 are together in the branch. So the potential difference across R3 is greater than the potential difference across R1, because for R1 the potential difference is splitting up between R1 and R2. So we say that the potential difference across R3 is greater than the potential difference across R1. Therefore, a greater amount of work is done in moving charge across R3, and hence the heating effect across R3 is greater. So with this we are done with question number 7. Let's move on to question number 8. Draw on the figure 8.1 4 complete magnetic field lines that show the pattern and the direction of the magnetic field inside and outside the solenoid. So you can see these orange lines which I have already drawn. So the magnetic field lines here for a solenoid look very much like that of a bar magnet, and to find out the direction over here you can make use of your right hand thumb rule. I have shown 4 complete loops here. For A2, mark a point inside the box in figure 8.1 where the magnetic field is strong. Label this point as B. So this point B could be anywhere wherever the magnetic field lines are closer. So magnetic field lines are closer here in the center, or they would also be closer on the extreme ends, since the extreme ends are like the poles and the magnetic field strength at the poles is higher. Now further, the explanation for this would simply be that, see, the closer the magnetic field lines, or you could say the more crowded the magnetic field lines, stronger will be the field. Now for the B part, figure 8.2 shows a solenoid in an electric circuit for a bell. Complete the circuit in figure 8.2 with the symbol for direct current power supply. Now the symbol for direct current power supply is simply going to be 2 circles with a positive and a negative. You may mark the positive and negative any other way around because the direction of current is not actually shown over here. Now for the second part, explain why the soft iron pivots, making the striker hit the bell when the switch is closed. Now the moment we pass current through the solenoid, it gets magnetized because it works like an electromagnet. Now once it is magnetized, the soft iron arm will be attracted towards it since soft iron is a magnetic material. Due to this, the striker will go and hit the bell. In all this, the contacts are going to lose the contact. So basically the circuit is going to break and the current will stop flowing. So in order to answer the second part, we could simply say that when we close the switch, the current starts to flow through the solenoid and the solenoid becomes an electromagnet. The soft iron, being a magnetic material, gets attracted and the contacts break. Due to this, the striker hits the bell. Okay, so that's all for the second part. Now let's move on to the third part. Explain why the arm pivots back to its original position after the striker hits the bell. Now, as the contacts were broken when the striker hit the bell, the solenoid stopped being an electromagnet and the soft iron loses magnetism, due to which the pivot goes back to the original position. So that's all for this one. We are done with question 8. Now let's move on to question number 9. So describe the structure of an atom of helium-4. Now helium-4, this tells us that there are 2 protons present in here, 2 neutrons and 2 electrons. Now protons and neutrons are inside the nucleus and electrons are outside it. So we would simply say that we have a positively charged nucleus which contains 2 protons and 2 neutrons. There are also 2 electrons present outside the nucleus. Also, the electrons are negatively charged. So this will fetch us our 3 marks. Further, moving on to the B part. The sun is a medium-sized star powered by nuclear fusion reactions which release energy. State what happens during nuclear fusion reaction which forms helium. So over there, what exactly happens is that we have 2 hydrogen atoms that combine to form a helium nucleus, and during this a large amount of energy is also released. A large amount of energy is released. State 2 regions of the electromagnetic spectrum by which the sun radiates most of its energy. So the answer here could be, it gives you most of the energy in the form of infrared, visible light, and there is UV also. So you can give any 2 out of these 3. Okay. Now for the C part, describe what happens to the star when most of the fuel in its center has been converted to helium. Now this basically means that the star in the present state is a main sequence star. Now for a main sequence star, once the fuel is exhausted, right? So what exactly happens is that if it's a small sized star, okay? So for a small sized star, once the fuel is exhausted, it will change into a red giant. But if it's a large star, in comparison to size, then it would change into a red supergiant. So depending on the size, it would be having the next stage in its life cycle. Okay, so basically what is happening is that the star presently is in the main sequence stage where the outward force due to the fusion is balanced by the gravitational force. So it is stable. But once the fuel is exhausted, the small star will change into a red giant. But if it's large in state, then it would change to a supergiant. And this will only happen once all the hydrogen is exhausted. So that's all for question number 9. Let's move on to question number 10. So figure shows the orbit of the Earth and the orbit of a comet around the Sun. State which orbit A or B is the orbit of the comet. Explain your answer. Look, the orbit of the comet is the orbit B. Why? Because as you can see, orbit B is the elliptical one. So the explanation here would be that comets have elliptical orbits. For the B part, describe and explain how the motion of the comet changes as it orbits the Sun. So over here, see, comets travel faster when they are closer to the Sun, because when they are closer to the Sun, that time GPE is less and the kinetic energy is higher. But when comets are far away from the Sun, they travel slower as the GPE, that's the gravitational potential energy, is higher and kinetic energy is less. So we will say that the comets, they travel faster when they are closer to the Sun. Why? Because that time the GPE is less and kinetic energy is high. But when the same comets, they travel slower when they are away from the Sun. Why? Because that time the gravitational potential energy is large and kinetic energy is less. Okay, that's how you'll answer the B part. Moving on to the C part. At one position in its orbit, the comet is 6.6 into 10 to the power minus 6 light years away from the Earth. State the meaning of light year. So light year is basically the distance traveled by light in one complete year in vacuum. Traveled by light in 1 year in vacuum. Then determine the distance in meters between the comet and the Earth. So we know that 1 light year is 9.5 into 10 to the power 15 meters. Now because of this, if I want to calculate the distance, and they told us the distance is 6.6 into 10 to the power minus 6 light years, so we just multiply. So we do 6.6 into 10 to the power minus 6 light years times 9.5 into 10 to the power 15 to put it in meters. So the distance when I put on the calculator comes out to be 6.3 into 10 to the power 10 meters. So with this, we are done with all the 10 questions in this paper. I hope you understood all the questions and my explanations behind them. If you like this, if you like my video, do press on to the subscribe button. Also, do subscribe to my channel, like my video. Thank you for watching.